All right, guys, here we are revisiting Fort Necessity again. Yesterday, you should have watched my video leading up to the beginning stages here, the competing empires in the Ohio River Valley. Well, George Washington at the time was a major in the Virginia militia, and he was sent to where today current Pittsburgh is. And he was there, and he made his way, and he was supposed to basically build upon a fort that the British had already really started building, but unfortunately, the British lost possession of this region, and when he arrived to assist with the building or assist in making this fort stronger, the British had already, or excuse me, the French had already been there, and they built a fort by the name of Fort Duquesne. So, in order to establish claim, he retreats about 50 miles south, and he builds this particular thing called Fort Necessity. Now, it's built out of necessity, hence the name, and this fort itself is not the most, impressive looking thing, but it does the job. It's basically a blockhouse in the middle that holds ammunition and gunpowder, and then you have some defensive walls around it, and it basically just makes up a big circle or a ring. And around it, they have some dugouts or readouts where men can sit in there and be defended, and they can defend the fort from an attack. Now, when you have a fort, you send out patrols. You have reconnaissance patrols, and you have ambush patrols, and you have patrols where you just send out some soldiers and you just check the area to make sure that nobody's watching you. Well, Washington and his men were on a patrol, and they encountered a small French force. Well, Washington decided to take action, and they decided to attack this French force, and they did, and they were victorious, and they took some captives. Unfortunately, a native by the name of what the British would later call him Half King, and his men decided to take actions into their own hands, and they decided to brutally, basically, kill several of the French soldiers that were held captive by Washington. Now, in the minds of European warfare, any captive should be basically held as some form of a ransom or eventually released and treated with dignity and respect. But it wasn't intended here. There was a message, a deeper message that this particular man known as Half King was trying to send to the French. Fortunately, one of the men that was killed was a man that was a brother of one of the men who actually was commanding Fort Duquesne at the time. This obviously didn't sit well. So what happened was later on, a large French force came back. Once they found out about it, a man was able to escape and go back to Fort Duquesne and tell them. And then a huge French force made their way down to Fort Necessity, and they eventually attacked Washington and his men here. And Washington and his men are defeated at Fort Necessity. I'm trying to pull this up, and once again, it is not. There we go. At Fort Necessity. This is just a painting that's reflecting the walls, and these are British soldiers outside the wall defending it. Well, it was during pouring rain, this particular battle, and gunpowder, when it gets wet, it does not work. And Washington and his men were just overwhelmed by the force, and they eventually had to surrender after several men are killed and wounded. They were actually allowed to leave this fort with their colors and their weapons. They were allowed to return to Virginia, but they had to actually explain to the Virginia government that the French were never giving up the Ohio River Valley, and this is a major problem. And this obviously starts to incite fear and worry within the people of Virginia, and that spreads through the rest of the colonies. Word is sent towards the northern colonies, and this is spread throughout regions like Philadelphia and Massachusetts and Maryland, and all of the people that are considered to be colonial leaders start to discuss what to do. The French have this region, they have control out here. Well, if they have control around the boundaries around our western borders, then what do we do for protection? So they start to talk about the British government and how the British government is going to protect them. They start to discuss about, well, what if the British government can't protect us, and how are we, as 13 colonies, going to protect ourselves? So what happens next is there is a meeting that is put place, and this meeting is known as the Albany Congress. The Albany Congress basically is a meeting because these three groups of people who are involved here, we have colonial leaders, people that are representing the colonies, that are the 13 colonies. Well, not all of them are there. We do have some people that are from Great Britain. They're royal British officials that are part of this meeting. And you do have members of the Six Nations or the Iroquois. I believe there might have been five nations at this time of the Iroquois tribe. So they get together. They meet in 1754 and they're discussing what to do. They're talking about defense. They're talking about unifying themselves to be able to put together some form of a government that could react and defend itself against the defenses, against the French and their native allies on the western frontier. This is just a map showing basically British territory prior to 1763, or this is basically 13 colonies. Now, 13 colonies we all know, hopefully all know, from 5th grade. You should have learned a little bit about this. But you can see starting in the south of Georgia and all the way up through the northern parts of Maine, which at the time was part of Massachusetts. So this is the map. Now, Albany Congress is just calling for this creation of different types of government, a unifying government. At the time, the colonial leaders and the colonies themselves, they basically governed themselves alone, with obviously reflecting some part of loyalty to the king and the crown and the British government. So they had a British government, but they also had colonial government where the people could speak and make decisions themselves. Now, this decision was a plan that was basically established by Benjamin Franklin. It's just talking about putting together these new type of government that could include someone known as a president general. He'd be appointed by the crown, meaning that the crown would say, hey, this is the guy that we feel is the most important to be in charge. This person would have overall powers over the relationships with the natives. They would be the ones that are making all of the plans. They're making all of the government decisions. They're making war, and they're discussing how to obviously go ahead and control the frontier, but using all of the colonies together to come up with these plans. It was basically the first time that we see this unified approach as the colonies coming together as one. It's a union. It's the later been known as the Albany Union. So this Congress itself, they try to come together. They try to put together this plan to create this unified government. And it eventually was voted upon within the Congress, and it passed. People at the Congress said, yes, we are going to come up with this plan. And the plan itself is going to create what's known as a federal or a federated colonial government. And unfortunately, it never got off the ground, meaning once this was voted upon, what happened was the people from the colonies, the delegates that went to this particular Congress, they returned back to their colonies to vote upon whether or not they agreed to do this. So it was approved by the people at the Albany Congress, but not a single colonial assembly ratified or basically agreed to the stipulations of that particular thing. Now, why that it didn't happen is that it was basically looking at the fact that the people in Britain also did not agree, because the people in Britain themselves, they thought that it was giving the colonial assemblies too much power. They didn't like that idea. They didn't like the idea of them having this idea of being unified together, because obviously having them unified together was a little bit too scary for them, for England, being too far away, and they felt that they had a little bit too much freedom and not so much thumb pressing from the king at that time. The people in the colonies, they thought, hey, this is just too much. Why do we have to defend people in the north when we're down in the south? We need to focus on our own defenses. We need to focus on our people here, and taxation is one thing that we can do here alone for the people of our colonies. So eventually what happened was the entire agreement was chosen as not the appropriate action, and the whole Albany Congress was basically not a success. The Iroquois kind of backed out because they just believed that the French were a stronger force at some point. They weren't necessarily confident that the British could win anyway, so they kind of laid on the outskirts, and they were waiting in the wings almost to see what was going to happen. They wanted to see this play out because they knew war was on the horizon. So what happens is Benjamin Franklin, he basically returns back to Philadelphia, and he is upset because he realizes that, hey, this needs to happen. We need to come up with a plan to defend ourselves. So he puts together this poster. And this poster is this join or die poster that is iconic. We see it everywhere. If you're a soccer fan, obviously the Sons of Ben are playing it down at the Union games. It eventually becomes a unified approach during the American Revolution. We see the "Don't Tread on Me" throughout, with the Second Amendment discussion throughout modern day United States. But this particular image in 1754 that was published by Benjamin Franklin has a lot of meaning here. Now, we have 13 colonies, but in this particular image, we see that we have this one particular snake that is chopped into 8. Now, there's reasons behind this. New England itself is a unified head. Now, he did this intentionally to show that there is a unification. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Rhode Island. He's trying to signify that there is unity there. Now, we're missing a couple colonies here. We don't see Delaware. Delaware is actually governed under Pennsylvania royal government, I believe, at the time. And Georgia just became a colony. So Georgia itself, it just really wouldn't be able to contribute much in the long run in terms of defenses towards a colonial government. So the SC is South Carolina, the NC is North Carolina, then we see Virginia, Maryland, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, New York, and New England as a whole. Join or die, meaning if we are joined together, we are a fierce snake that is ready to fight and defend ourselves and bite at the enemy and defend all that we have here. But if we don't join together, then all we are is a chopped up, fragmented, dead snake on the ground. So it's an image that's trying to incite fear. It's an image that is trying to hit the hearts of people. Today we see memes of such kind, and we see different ways in social media to do this. Back in the day, all they had was these newspapers, these ability to communicate. Now, he also did this, majority of it, just as an image. He didn't really write about this. He just did a picture because literacy wasn't one of the strong suits of the people of the colonies at the time. They were very literate people, but it just wasn't one of the strong suits. So the idea of join or die is a message. It is a message of fear for the people of the colonies to say, hey, if we don't do this, we have a major problem. We need to come up with a plan, and you need to vote in favor of this. So he was hoping essentially that a new idea or maybe a new thought towards the Albany Plan would get back together and that people could come together and really agree to make this plan of union happen so that this war itself could be defended by the colonies with the support of the royal military as well. So what I want you guys to do is I want you to come up with your own plan or your own image of the join or die snake. So you're going to look at the PDF. You'll see it attached into today's folder. Look at the PDF. Create your own join or die, either in paper or poster or however you want to do it. And then you're going to either take a picture of it or you're going to manipulate it in Notability somehow and then resubmit it. Just a couple of rules. You have to include all 8 colonies. You cannot use a snake. It should say join or die on it. You can make it as creative as you want. Please add color and have it submitted by the due date. So yesterday we talked about pages 140 into some of 141, and then today we talked about the Albany Congress, which does go over into 142. We're going to start talking about the British defeats early on, and we're going to get into the war and talk about how the British turned the tide. So, like I said, if this outlet for me is not good for you, let me know, please, on the updates. Shoot me an email, whatever. But as of right now, like I said, it kind of feels like we're back in the classroom. So you don't have to do anything with the PowerPoints. You just sit and watch. In the future, we will have an assessment on some of this. I'm not really sure if we want to do a quiz yet or how we're going to do it. But please just stand by and keep working hard and make sure you're checking in for your attendance. And, have good luck and have fun with your posters. See you.